Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. This is going to be a good one. Before diving in, James and I want to make one thing clear to our loved ones, friends, and families watching. We understand that this episode is likely going to raise some eyebrows. However, to make this clear, we do not endorse the uneducated and reckless use of psychedelics. Rather, today is an earnest attempt to engage in an open dialogue conversation about a topic that we believe deserves very careful consideration, as this has the potential to change lives. Throughout this entire episode, we will emphasize the importance of education. With that being said, let's dive into the greatest mystery of human consciousness, psychedelics. Here we go. James Schillinger on the podcast, episode 6. Make some noise! Woo! James, thanks for coming on here, brother.
What's up, bro?
How long have we been wanting to do this?
Definitely a while now, and I'm guessing by the time that this is posted, you won't even be in this country.
That is true. That is very true.
Be all the way in Asia.
That is true. Are you nervous about this?
I wouldn't say, honestly, a little nervous.
I'm pretty nervous.
I'm more excited than anything.
I am more excited than nervous. I am nervous, though. But, anything exciting in life has nerves.
Definitely. I mean, I'm guessing when you went skydiving that one time, or I guess more than one time now.
Yes.
But the first time, I'm guessing you were scared, but it's truly a rush. And once you get into it, it's exhilarating, it's thrilling, and, you know, it's life-changing.
Yep. Okay, what are we going to be talking about today, and why should people give value to anything we say?
Okay, so I can speak for myself here when I say this. So, well, first of all, we are talking about psychedelics. And to be safe and keep it with what we are knowledgeable of, we are specifically going to be talking about mushrooms.
What is a psychedelic?
A psychedelic, so I'm glad you asked. So a psychedelic, it's not a stimulant, it's not a depressant, it's not any of those other classes of drugs you've heard of. Like, in fact, like, it is so far from all of those other, drugs, correct? And it's its own class, and basically what it does is
it's its own class.
It's its own class
of drugs, substances, medicine.
Yes.
But you made a good point earlier. Everything is a drug, in a way. Not everything, but Advil is a drug.
Yeah. Earlier I was talking about how
caffeine is a drug.
Advil's a drug. Caffeine's a drug. Anything like that's a drug, and I really don't want the word drug to subtract from what we are trying to achieve and what we're trying to convey here.
What are we trying to convey?
We're trying to convey, psychedelics are not what everyone has been led to believe.
There's a lot of
lies.
Would you say it's lies?
I would say it's lies. Absolutely.
So, we both read this book, or I guess you're starting to read it.
Yes.
But either way, me and James have spent, this is the book that was one of the first things that I read about psychedelics. I was trying to calculate how many hours I've spent researching psychedelics. Of course you can't. I don't have a screen time number. But like legitimately, I think I've spent 150 hours plus interviewing people, researching this online, reading books. James himself has spent countless hours. And I mean, like, it feels like I have it feels like I've nearly done a degree in this, based on how much time I've spent studying this. And when I say this, I'm talking about psychedelics, which again, like James said, is a category of, what word do we want to use? I know drugs has such...
I just want to use the word substance because,
Yeah, because we're worried that the word drug is, like you said, it'll take away.
From the argument.
So it's a group of drugs, group of substances that has been altering the minds of humans for thousands of years. Thousands of years. What do you know about the history of these substances in terms of like Native Americans, or just how long they've been used for? What I know, humans, we don't have interviews of Native Americans or humans thousands of years ago, but we've definitely read about how these have been used for a long time. Mm-hmm. We're not just first discovering this.
Of course. What I would actually like to talk about is not Native Americans or South America, because I believe that everyone has at least somewhat of a knowledge of, they've heard of, ayahuasca or things like that, in South America.
Which is a different type of psychedelic.
It's another psychedelic. It's just not a mushroom. But I would like to actually go to where people don't really know that psychedelics have existed. And one of them is with the Greeks.
Oh, yes.
So I want to talk about specifically that, Plato, Socrates, Diogenes, and some of the other great philosophers of Greece. Some people even consider those people to be some of the first great philosophers, right?
Yep.
They went and they took part in something called the kykeon, which was a drink made from a few things, among them water and barley, from what we've discovered. However, what's interesting is that there is a type of which is ergot, which is a fungus, and in some cases it's deadly, but some of them tend to cause hallucinations. And there's a type of ergot that grows on barley in Greece. And so what it's believed, based on the accounts of those philosophers, is that they actually were doing psychedelics when they took part in the kykeon.
So these philosophers, these great wisdom teachers, according to what you read, there's a lot of
evidence that points to them using psychedelics that led to their minds being opened and led to them coming to the conclusions and ideas that they did. Which is super cool.
That's
when you
crazy.
think about it.
I remember
crazy.
the first time I heard that.
Yeah, it's
But
that's insane.
to be honest, well, it was surprising because I didn't know that, but it is, based on the research we've done, it really is not. It's in hindsight, it's not surprising to hear that some of the greatest minds were possibly using the greatest, quote unquote. Some people say that psychedelics are the greatest tool for introspection ever discovered. Back to one of the questions that I think I might have interrupted you. Why should people listen to you and I? I guess I'm asking you. So why should people listen to you when you discuss this? I could maybe answer this later or whatnot.
Of course.
And then what overall are the takeaways that you're hoping someone would gain from this, from listening to you?
So for me, I'll try to do a shortened version of my story getting into psychedelics and learning about them. I have he used to be my friend. His name is Dawson, and he was talking to me about psychedelics. And if you know me, especially like a few years ago, I've always been very anti-drug. I don't like nicotine. I don't like vapes. I despise them. I hate what addiction does to people. I am very anti all of that.
You're a strong Christian man.
I'm a strong Christian man. And I'm also, regardless of religion, I hate seeing people being chained by addiction.
Yeah.
And so he was talking to me about it, and then he kind of got to a point where he's like, well, would you ever consider maybe a microdose? And I thought to myself, okay, maybe someday. Not today, not this day, someday. And months and months and months later, I went through some stuff in my life where I ended up having someone offer me, mushrooms. And I thought to myself, you know what, why not? And I ended up taking a small amount, and there wasn't really much that happened from that. But long story short, it made me fascinated with fungi, because I thought, if fungi can have such an amazing effect on the mind, I wonder what else is out there to offer, because it can't just.
But your first time, it did not have an.
It didn't have an amazing effect, but that's what changed my mind, because I did a small amount, for reference.
Okay.
I'm not saying that it can't do anything crazy. Obviously, that's why we're talking here. It's amazing, but my first time wasn't anything crazy, which is what changed my mind about it, because I thought, no. I've heard that this is going to destroy your brain. It's going to be mind melting. It's going to be crazy. I'm going to go crazy. You know what I mean? That's what you always hear. And then in reality, colors were just beautiful. I didn't have any dragons or scary things coming out of walls or insects crawling around. It was, the greens were more green. The blues were more blue. And I was able to just think and hear my own thoughts and really work through things.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by it wasn't anything insane. I'm not saying it wasn't a positive experience. It was an amazingly positive experience. That's why I was so interested in it. It just wasn't crazy.
So would you describe this as you were, quote unquote, high?
No, absolutely not. I do not, I wouldn't even put it close to the word high in this scenario. I put it more, I would more say my eyes were open.
Eyes were opened. Do you feel like that the first experience, you learned things about God, about yourself, your relationship with God?
I wouldn't go to that far, and just to be fully blunt, fully honest. But what I will say, later on, yes. But that first experience got me interested in the world of mushrooms. Not even psychedelics, just mushrooms.
Okay.
So if you don't know, now, I'm wearing this shirt. I have loads of books on mushrooms, because I actually cultivate, and I want to clarify here, I cultivate gourmet and medicinal mushrooms. Like medicinal, I mean lion's mane. I mean, what's another one? I'm blanking out here. I'll just go with lion's mane's a great one. I recently actually cultivate, like grow. So,
Okay.
I'm even about to start growing some king oyster mushrooms. Like,
What are they? I don't know any of these. I do know that none of what you just said is what people think of as magic mushrooms. But these are different.
so no, these are fully legal mushrooms. These are not drugs.
Like mushrooms you buy at the store.
Yeah. So well, almost. This
Not
is
the
a whole
ones-
nother topic. However, most of those mushrooms you don't see in a store because they never can actually last until they make it to the market, which is a whole nother topic for another time. That's actually starting to change. You're about to see those a lot more in your local grocery stores, especially Whole Foods. However, that's a totally different topic. But they are very similar to what you'd have in the grocery store, except I'd actually argue that they are better for you. They're safer, more nutrients. They have a much better effect on your mind. I don't know if you've heard of companies like Mudwater, which make
Yeah.
coffee substitutes using lion's mane and other mushrooms. And it's those kind of mushrooms where they're very healthy, good for your mind, positive effect.
Yeah.
And so those are the ones that I am into growing, cultivating. And so when I say that I have loads and loads and loads and loads of research on not just psychedelic mushrooms, but mushrooms in general, I 1000% do. 1000%. And I think that's a pretty credible argument there, saying like I know the ins and outs of like
So you've done a lot of research, have a lot of experience in fungi in general.
Fungi
And
in general,
Do you
yes.
know this the quote or stat that like humans share 50% of DNA with like fungi or something crazy?
it should be more than that, because if we're, regardless of whether you believe in evolution or not, the proposed theory of evolution, if you follow that, you'd have the single organisms that split off to make different things, such as like, is a split here, that's plants, is a split here, that's something else, split here, right?
Yeah.
So the split right down here at the bottom was plants, like from that whatever organism that was, plants. Okay?
Yep.
Now we're going to continue down the line. All the way up here, we have fungus and then animals. Now if you notice, that's a very long distance, as in plants, fungus, animals. They split right off from each other, and it gets more crazy when you look at how similar they are. For example, little weird fact, when mushrooms pee, and in a sense they do pee, it is yellow. I know that's like such a random fact.
They
Mushrooms,
pee?
yeah, so whenever they have an infection or they're fighting off something, they release, I'm trying to think of the name for it.
But a liquid?
Yeah,
A yellow liquid.
a yellow liquid.
That's crazy.
And I don't know, I'm blanking out on it, but that doesn't matter.
That's
It's
crazy.
yellow liquid. And it's metabolites.
But what you're saying is we're related to mushrooms.
On a
Fungi. Our DNA. on a
Genetic
DNA.
level, yes. I mean, it's even further than that.
And what does that mean? Why does that matter? Or is that just
it's
kind
it's
of
just
like...
so fascinating, and it also shows that there's a lot we can relate to when it comes to mushrooms and fungus. I mean, when you look at a mycelial network, it uses electrical impulses to communicate across the network. Where else do we see electrical impulses communicating across the network? The human brain, animal brains. What do we breathe? We breathe oxygen. We exhale carbon dioxide. What does fungi breathe? Fungi breathes oxygen and exhales carbon dioxide. Okay, do we eat or do we photosynthesize? We eat. Fungus will eat. It does not photosynthesize. It cannot photosynthesize. It needs to chemically digest something.
Whoa.
So the same foods that you and I eat, fungi can eat. That's why you have mold growing on your old food. Because it is literally eating the food.
So all that being said, fungi, mushrooms, one of the most fascinating subjects ever.
Yes.
But what does
Even
this lead
without-
to?
Even without the psychedelics,
Even without the psychedelics.
fungi is one of the most fascinating things I've ever come across. And I highly recommend we'll get into that. But again, that's a topic for another time too, right?
Okay, so now alone it's interesting, but you were also basically saying that I don't know much about fungi itself. I know a lot about psilocybin mushrooms, which is
Yes.
magic mushrooms or shrooms. People have street names for it.
Yeah.
But like you said, do you want to dive?
Yeah,
should we dive into that?
in. So, I can't go and study mycology, the study of fungi, without getting into, all the different kinds of mushrooms and fungus. And one of the biggest ones is the psychedelic mushroom. So if I'm going to be researching mushrooms, I had to look more into psychedelic mushrooms. And the most common one that you and I have heard about, like you said, the psilocybe cubensis, also cubes, truffle,
What is that?
whatever. Psilocybe cubensis, it's a little brown cap, mostly white mushroom, sometimes hints of blue, and it's what you normally would call shrooms.
Or magic mushrooms?
Magic mushrooms. Yeah.
Okay. And this is what, when ingested, gives you strange visions?
Among
how would you
other
describe
many
it?
things.
Okay. And, of course, we would not come here to talk about this if it wasn't for an important reason.
Absolutely.
So, why are we talking about this? Why do we even feel the need to record this? And even risk people raising an eyebrow at us and
of course.
thinking less of us, when in fact we're trying to discuss something that it has nothing to do with being immature. I'm not saying people have not used this in an immature way. Anything can be used immaturely. But we believe this to be something that legitimately could change lives. As it has.
Absolutely.
If you go on the internet, you will read about thousands of people, maybe even to say hundreds of thousands of people, a lot of people that have had their lives impacted by psychedelics, or specifically mushrooms, which is a type of psychedelic.
Yes.
Magic mushrooms.
Absolutely.
So why, I guess from ground zero again, why do you even feel the need to say this?
Well,
Why do you want to tell people this?
you made a point that, people are going to raise their eyebrows at us.
Yeah.
And that this is not an easy topic to go into. And as a Christian, I've been very involved with my church.
Yep.
I've always volunteered there. I've always, Sundays.
Yeah, you've been very involved.
And I'm still very Christian. There's nothing that changed before taking psychedelics and after. And the reason why I'm coming out here to say that, talk about psychedelics, despite that I know that there's going to be a lot of uninformed Christians out there, some of the same people as me, that are going to hate and shun, or maybe even strongly disagree, or be mad about it, or say that I'm misleading people. But the reason why I am coming out and talking about this is I believe that psilocybin mushrooms are a beautiful tool that can be used by Christians, that can help Christians, not
In what
hurt.
way?
So I would actually love to get into that, and part of it is how it interacts with the brain. It's not just about funny visions, fun, haha,
But what is the result of it?
What is the result? The result.
Someone has a Christian has a positive experience on mushrooms.
What do they gain?
What would that look like? A week later, a month later.
Being more selfless, being more empathetic, being more giving, having your flesh have less of a hold on your life, in a sense of worrying less about death.
How? From this mushroom experience?
From the mushroom
I'm
experience.
asking how,
from the
as if I don't understand
psychedelic
it.
experience.
So you're saying you take these mushrooms, you have this altered perception of reality, you almost disassociate with yourself slightly, which
Yes.
in turn has the potential to make you objectively a better human.
Objectively. Yes.
Because, and this is why we've read a lot about, especially in this book too, well, not this book, but they mentioned a study where they gave they had cancer patients who, well, I don't know if they had 1 year to live, 5 years to live, whatever it was. I think it was 1 year to live.
It was a range of different.
Okay. And these people had terminal cancer.
Yes.
At least there's been a lot of studies, but
Yes.
the one study that I'm mentioning, they had terminal cancer, they were going to die, and they gave them a high dose of, I forgot if it was specifically, I think it was psilocybin mushrooms. They gave them a high dose. So what we've been talking about, magic mushrooms.
Yeah.
They had an experience, and an overwhelming amount of them said that it had nearly eradicated their fear of death, because they had come to the realization that basically all of their fears are not as deep as they think. I'm going to die. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to die.
To quote the book, they became more accepting of death.
And how is that a good thing?
Well, I think especially as a Christian, for anyone, one of the biggest fears is death.
Yeah.
And I
the
think
ultimate fear is death.
And I don't think anyone should live life in
with
fear.
Anxiety, yeah.
Yeah, and fear, anxiety. Let's be honest, we're all going to die someday as far as physicality goes. Whether you're religious or not, we all know that our physical bodies are going to die.
Yep.
Right? And so why fear something that you can't change? Why fear something that you at the end of the day, if I was a cancer patient, I'd rather not be fearing death. I'd rather be happy, enjoying my time,
Yep.
and living life, and knowing that, you know what, I will pass away, and I'm okay with that, rather than
Yep.
living each day in fear, because that's not life at all.
Yep. Which is what the Bible says. I mean, every time Jesus or an angel like appears to someone in the Bible, their first words are like, "Do not be afraid."
Yeah.
And like, what is the verse? True love casts out all fear, or something of the sort. Like, true fear is not good. And objectively, psychedelics, it seems that people eradicate a lot of their fear of death and become much more accepting of what's happening to them. But I also want to make it clear, not accepting in a way of picture someone who's overweight sitting on a couch, they take psychedelics, they're like accepting that they're overweight. More of like they see life clear for the first time. It's almost like they've had a blurred contact lens in their eye and they have a psychedelic experience and they all of a sudden can see what's really happening. So that's what we're saying is happening to people.
I love that you pointed that out, like the whole, like, you know, you could have an overweight person on the couch. Is it going to make them okay with being like, you know, like not wanting to change, being complacent with being overweight? And I would say, I would say no. I would say that I do think if there's an overweight person who struggles with, you know, anxiety or self-image in that sense, and they take it, I think they could be more accepting of loving them just how they are. But I don't think it makes them complacent and okay with remaining that way. I think it actually might make them more, you know, aware of the problem and more determined to actually be able to fix it.
When you become a father, I'm assuming you want to become a father.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the only things I care about in life, if I'm being honest.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I've heard I have not yet to have kids yet, but I've heard
Neither
it's one of
have
the
I.
greatest experiences. I think a lot of things that people say, okay, or this is what I'm trying to say. A good moral test is how would you want to introduce this to your kids? Because if people argue that this is morally wrong, you would not want to introduce this to your kids if you believe this was morally wrong.
Truthfully, yes.
So how are you going to go about this with your kids? If you had a kid today who was 10 years old, 15 years old, I don't know, pick an age, what would you start telling them about psychedelics or mushrooms? And what would you tell them and when?
I think at a very young age, I would expose them to mushrooms themselves, not psychedelic mushrooms, but just the world of mushrooms, saying, hey, like, hey, these are like fun. A lot of them are very healthy, nutritious, you know, support brain development, and that's great. I think at a older age, you know, when they're able to truly understand the depth of, you know, complex concepts, I would entirely explain to them, you know, the world of psychedelics. Again, not saying that they should take them at that age, but I want to make it clear to them, and you know, all of the ins and outs of it. I want them to know how it works, so that way when they are at an age where they can make an informed decision themselves as an adult, that they can do that. Okay. So, you know, I'm not going to have a 14-year-old son and say, hey, you're 14. Take a substance that alters your brain. No.
Yep.
I would say, hey, you're 14. You have 4 years to learn a lot about this.
Yep.
You have 4 years to learn the ins and outs, to learn if this is the right option for you, to learn if this is good for you.
Yep.
And then you can make an informed decision when you're an adult and can do whatever you want.
Okay, because I just want to make this clear, because I have a younger sister, I have younger cousins.
Yep.
And I just think that if theoretically they were seeing this, what would I want them to know about this topic? And I definitely would want them to know that I am not, as I said, as we mentioned in the beginning of this video, in no way are we recommending that people just turn around and try this. I mean, this
Absolutely, yeah.
You mentioned this earlier. Like, it'd be like giving someone a Lamborghini and they've never driven. I mean, you were just giving them an immense amount of power. And we're making an analogy to the power of psychedelics, and specifically magic mushrooms. I mean, this is nothing to play around with.
It's not a toy.
Not a toy. This is not even for fun. This is for self-improvement.
Absolutely.
Which is why it's being studied in the therapeutic setting for therapy.
Yes.
It's like there's so many interesting studies about the possibilities of it. It just unfortunately hasn't been legal, so they've been completely bottlenecked on what they can do. But
yeah.
But I mean, I guess again, what would you want to say to a 15-year-old watching this?
Like I said,
who has no idea what we're talking about, and I guess the fear is that I would hope to God that they would not jump to this conclusion, but in no way are we saying to go try substances just recklessly.
Absolutely.
I mean, absolutely not. This is the opposite. I mean, we're saying to like,
Yeah.
What would you want to say?
Well, like I would say to my own kid, because at the end of the day, if I believe it's safe for them or not safe for them, I should be able to apply that to everyone. It either isn't safe or it is safe. And what I would say is that if you are below the age of 18 and you do want to try it, please, for the love of God, talk to a parent about it. Like, don't just make that decision at the young age by yourself. I would please say, I know it can be scary, but like do it in a setting like, maybe I think in a few years you'll be able to actually get prescribed psychedelics in a therapeutic setting, like go through therapy sessions with it. And so I'd say, if you're 15 years old and your parents aren't okay with you doing it, I hate to say it, maybe respect your parents. You have 3 years to learn all you can about it, and in those 3 years, I'm sure you'll be able to decide if it's right for you. You'll turn 18. You will become an adult, and you can make your own decisions then. And it's up to you to decide, do I want to do it? Do I not want to? But I think the biggest thing that we want to say, and I think you even mentioned this in your little intro, we want to educate people. We are not trying to tell people to do something. We want people to make educated decisions.
Okay.
And so that would be what I would say to a 14-year-old, 15-year-old. Please, become educated.
How?
No matter what. There's loads of resources online. You can go to YouTube. You can read clinical studies. I mean, if you can look... Books, absolutely. I mean, right here. This book, How to Change Your Mind. There's Netflix series out there. There's a Netflix series on this one. Now, I'm not saying get all your information from Netflix or even YouTube. I'm just saying there's easy to digest sources of information regarding the subject.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And you made the claim that it's safe.
100%.
What about overdosing?
Ooh, that's a good point.
Can you overdose on mushrooms?
On mushrooms?
Magic mushrooms.
Psilocybin mushrooms. I believe on mushrooms themselves, the actual mushroom, dried or wet, I do not believe you can.
Yeah, I've read that as well, that there has never, as far as all of the studies, the thousands of people and the thousands of personal experience, there's never been anyone who has died directly from the use of the substance.
Yes.
Although, of course, this is still extremely rare.
Outliers.
There are stories of people jumping out of a window.
Yeah, that make
running
rash
in front
decisions.
of a car.
Absolutely.
And so you just said it's safe, but if people have died that way, how is it safe?
Well,
and how many people are we talking about who have died from?
Well, how about I clarify? I believe the informed, rational, and I'm trying to think of a good word to use here. Careful use of psychedelics is entirely safe. As in, are you going to fry your brain? No. Are you going to be traumatized forever? Again, if you use it in a safe, rational manner? No. When you hear those studies about people running in front of cars or jumping out of windows, those are situations that they should have never been able to get into to begin with. As in, if they would have taken the time to do the research, not just on the substance themselves, but how to take it. Because, learning about it's one thing, learning how to use it is another. You can learn about cars all you want. That doesn't mean you know how to drive. Right? So I can spend hours learning about cars, how they work, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But if I don't know how to actually drive and how to get a feel for the car, I'm going to crash. And in that same sense, if you don't know how to take it safely, if you don't know how to use it safely, there's a chance that you will make rash decisions that you shouldn't have been able to make in the first place. That's what I would say to people that are worried out there saying, well, what about this? What about this?
Yeah. So there has never been anyone to overdose from it. I mean, just like marijuana as well. Like, nobody has ever gotten too high and just died.
I mean, on a chemical level, it's almost impossible to overdose because the thing about mushrooms is, let's say you take too much, correct? If you take too many, you will vomit. There's not a if, but it's more of a when. When you will vomit. It could be in a minute. It could be the second it reaches that stomach. But if you take too many, you will vomit. And it will come back up. Like, there's no doubts about that. And then even if you didn't vomit it, your body begins to build a tolerance almost instantly. As in, if you were to take randomly 5 grams one day, 5 grams the next day, that 5 grams the next day will be minuscule. The experience will be minuscule. It will be small. It'll be tiny. It won't be comparable to what you experienced the day before. And so on that note, not only is it essentially impossible to overdose, it's nearly impossible, and I'd say nearly as a 99% chance one cannot be addicted. I repeat that again, I'd say around a 99 or higher percent chance that you cannot be addicted. And to that 1%, I don't believe that they're actually addicted to the substance itself. They might be addicted to, the experience. They might love what they experience on it. But as far as the actual urge, the want to do it again, kind of like how, you have an urge to eat food, or if you're on a substance, you have an urge to do it. I think the best way to describe it is the urge to take mushrooms would be the same as the urge to eat wood chips. You don't want to just grab a handful of wood chips and eat them, right? I think that it remains the same way. Like, yeah. You have no want or desire. It's out of personal decision that you choose to partake.
Yep.
And that's how I view it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Would you like to recap exactly the claims you've been making so far?
Yeah.
In short.
So in short, the things I just
what have we discussed?
The things I just said were it's non-addictive,
okay,
and you can't overdose. And what I'd like to get into is the third point that I said earlier. I think it's a valuable tool even for Christians.
Okay, a valuable tool even
for Christians.
For Christians.
Obviously for non-Christians as well.
How we've tried to address the immediate pushbacks to what we're saying,
mm-hmm.
such as the dangers of it.
Yeah, the misconceptions of danger.
Misconceptions. But again, really quick, so on the risks and dangers, I know there is risk with people who have schizophrenia in their family, correct? I believe that it's not recommended.
It's not recommended, I would say. How about this?
Which is pretty obvious.
How about this? Let's use common sense here. If you have a family history of seeing things that aren't there, you probably shouldn't take a substance that makes you possibly see things that aren't there. And I think anyone with... that's what I'm saying. As long as you're smart and informed about it, there's not much risk. As in, I was like, hey, I see things sometimes. Or maybe my family does. Should I take something that makes me see things? No. And when you think of it just with common sense, use your brain, take it slow. That's why I'm saying I don't believe there's risk there.
And, okay, so how is this... I know we've had to address all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
How is this really a valuable tool?
How is it a valuable tool?
How is this a valuable tool for people in general, for Christians?
Mm-hmm.
What is the potential of using this tool for introspection?
Okay, so
and personal growth?
I want to get into specifically the part of the brain that it works on, which you can actually read about in this book for more knowledge on that. It's actually where I learned a lot of the information I'm about to provide right now.
Well, what does it do in the end? It does this in the brain, it does this in this. What is the result?
I need to go through what it does in the brain for it to make sense when I make the claims.
Okay.
Just trust me on that, okay?
All right.
So the part of the brain, and I'm going to pull up my phone so I can read the exact definition for everyone out there, okay? The part of the brain that shrooms affects is called the default mode network. And the default mode network, it's the part of the brain that includes the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, the precuneus, and angular gyrus, okay? Now, I know everyone's thinking, okay,
what is
brain
that?
stuff, who cares? To keep it short and simple, that's the part of your brain.
The default mode network.
The default mode network. If you look up what the default mode network is, because I want to make sure I'm providing a...
I remember reading about this. It's let me actually see if I'm right as you pull it up. Like the default mode network is, according to what I remember reading, the part of your brain that is just working by habit. Like the things you do, it is the default way that you think. Your default, right? Think of like the default Fortnite skin. You immediately have the default. So your brain has these systems and habits that you have developed that you immediately do, right? So when you're like a kid, you immediately get angry when somebody takes your toy, and you have to train your default mode network to not be angry or to treat situations differently.
Yes.
And I think what they're saying with psychedelics is that it affects this part of the brain. The blood flow does this. It affects this part of the brain, and then in result causes you to rethink your habits and quite literally question everything you've been doing your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And possibly, which is why people alter their life after psychedelics in a positive manner if they are doing it correctly. They look at their lives, it affects their default mode network, and then they're like, oh, I need to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
Or about to say when I just kind of went on my spiel?
No, yeah. And to touch on parts of it that are extremely important.
That I missed.
Not that you missed.
I never miss.
Okay.
Go.
To touch on the points that I believe are important and why I want to really drive this home is if we look up the basic, dumbed down, extremely easy definition for anyone out there that can easily understand this, right? The default mode network is active during passive rest and mind wandering, which usually involves thinking about others, thinking about self, and so forth. And what I really want to drive the point on is thinking about self. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Keep that in the back of your mind. Thinking about self. It is the part of the brain associated with self, as in your own identity, how you perceive yourself, etc., etc. Okay? It also is involved with remembering the past, planning for the future, and so on and so forth. As you can see, this is a part of the brain that, the default mode network, or default network for short, is an extremely vital part of the brain that does a lot of valuable stuff.
And on psychedelics, this is affected.
On psychedelics, it's affected.
Okay.
And so, what a common misconception is that when you're on psychedelics, that your brain's going to be sped up. It's lighting up like a firework, right? Oh my gosh, that's why you're seeing all these things. But what's really interesting is it actually is slowing down the default mode network. It's slowing down the part of your brain that, thinks about others, thinks about self, planning for future, present, whatever. And so the biggest part of that, I think, that you'll notice is the thinking about self, perceiving self, identity of self, okay? And I really want to drive that point because I'm guessing you've heard of this. Have you heard of ego death?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we both know we've heard of ego death. And
most definitely, sir.
How about this? I'll ask you, what is ego death?
Ego death is the term described, I don't know if it's only for psychedelics, but on a high dose of psychedelics, essentially the more psychedelics you take in one setting, if you take, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grams specifically for mushrooms, the higher you go, the more you experience this disassociation with
from self,
your literal body and mind. It's like you're all of a sudden, I almost describe it as like, it's like you become a spectator of your own life, and you have ego death, which essentially means that you're like no longer Grayson. And people even on ego death will start to forget their name. They will literally disassociate with themselves and be like, whoa. So, as far as I know, that's what ego death is.
Yeah. And another way to look at it is what you'll notice as you slow down that part of the brain and reach ego death, because as you said, it was on high amounts of, psilocybin mushrooms or psychedelics for that matter. But when you go from 1 gram to 2 grams to 3 grams to 4, as you increase that, you have a more dissociative effect, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what most people would argue is that around 5 grams dried on shrooms is where you experience ego death. And the reason why is as you start to slow down that part of your brain, the default mode network, more and more and more, you have less and less self. And once you reach that 5 gram mark, at that point, you have no concept of self. You are now, and in other words, selfless. It makes you a perfectly selfless human, not selfish. It is impossible to be selfish in that moment. So you can only be selfless. Yeah. There is no self anymore.
This is crazy.
Exactly.
This is the reason why quote unquote stereotypical hippies, who are typically people who promote psychedelics, whatever. Maybe I'm not saying that they're doing it correctly, whatever. But that's why hippies, right, are all like peace and love. Because they have realized what it's like to be not yourself, to like step outside of yourself. To do things for others,
Exactly.
The world does not revolve around you, and psychedelics could be the first time you realize that.
Exactly.
And I don't mean realize it, obviously people know the world doesn't revolve around them, but, there's different levels of realizations, right?
Absolutely.
You might, you don't know what it's like to lose your father until you actually lose your father. Mm-hmm. So, I'm just saying, this can be
absolutely
literally alter the course of your life.
Absolutely. Another way to think about it is, how people say that they feel more in touch with nature, what's around them.
From psychedelics?
From psychedelics, you know?
Yeah.
Again, same part of the brain. As you slow that down and you have less concept of self, I guess let's put a line. There's a line right here, Grayson, between what's Grayson and what's James. Okay?
Yeah.
And you could look at it as your skin. Like, generally, that's what you're going to experience. Like, what's not your skin and your brain, past that, is the outside world. Correct?
Yes.
But as your brain has drawn a line on what's self and what's not. As you slow down the part of your brain that it thinks about self, that identifies self, that is essentially self, well, that line becomes blurred, more blurred, more blurred, until a point where it's not indistinguishable from what is self and what's not.
So this ego death is what you
not
experienced.
So not even just ego death, but approaching ego death.
The ego dissolution or ego
Yeah.
loss, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, so that's
You're
why
like
people
slipping away from yourself.
You're slipping away from yourself, but not in a scary, dangerous, bad way, but in a sense that you are losing your grasp on self. Temporarily, I'll add. This is not something that's like, oh, you're permanently not going to have self. It is simply temporarily slowing it down so you can experience the world as if you were completely, entirely selfless.
If you take out the word psychedelic, this sounds like a typical, almost, lesson that a pastor at a Christian church would be telling someone to become selfless.
Dude, yes.
Which is the
Absolutely.
whole point of
And
what we're saying. Is this is not against
Yes.
the Bible. This goes along with every great thing that we have learned from all of human history about becoming the best version of yourself, becoming selfless, becoming an individual that spreads love and not hate. I mean,
Yep.
this is what this is all about.
Yep.
This is not a radical change. This just could cause people to realize these things that the Bible and other things of wisdom have been teaching us.
Yes. Absolutely. It's insane.
It's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, we unfortunately, us just saying this will never convey
Yeah.
the true weight of what we're trying to
Absolutely.
say.
And
I mean, it's inevitable that it won't, but
Mhm.
I guess that's why we're saying for people to go read about this themselves. I mean, literally just
Exactly.
reading about it. If you read this book, you will be so fascinated. Sounds like we're like advocating for this book.
So another thing that I want to talk about is that before I came on here, one of the biggest things is I wanted to make sure my heart was in the right place as a Christian, and I wanted to make sure that what I was saying truly wasn't wrong. I didn't want to mislead people, and so it's up to you guys if you want to believe this or not. You know, I'm just going to say my personal experience, and again, people can say BS, people can say, wow, I believe him, I trust him. I don't care. I'm going to speak what happened for me and my experience, and that was I was walking on the street at night just the other day, and I literally said, you know, God, I don't want to mislead people. I want to make sure that I'm showing people that, in a sense, you can, like, my message to people is that this is something that can take you from a state of being, you know, one person and can let you be reborn to another. As in,
Kind of like a baptism.
so I said to God, I just need a sign. And the word and the numbers that I had on my mind right then in that moment were John 3 and 4. And so, this is the funny part, I then explained, okay, yes, John 34. So I go and I grab my Bible, I open my Bible app, and I'm like, okay, John 34. There is no John 34.
Sheesh.
So I then felt ridiculous, and I was like, okay, so like obviously it was just me making something up in my head to try to like, you know, make my argument feel right, or maybe I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just me being thrown off. But then I thought to myself, John 3:4. Wait, John 3:4. John 3:4. So I went to John, chapter 3, verse 4. How can someone be born when they are old? Nicodemus asked. Surely they cannot enter a second time into their mother's womb to be born. And while I'm obviously not saying that the Bible is talking about psychedelics in that moment, but I was asking God for a sign that what I wanted to say was okay to say, and that I felt would be right. I wanted to tell people that they could, in a sense, die to their self, which is something that's talked about in the Bible a lot.
Those who enter the kingdom of heaven must be born again.
And again, I'm not saying, I want to clarify, that would be blasphemy for me to say that is specifically talking about psychedelics. Obviously
Oh, yeah.
not. But I will say that the Bible is clear that dying to self, killing self, and becoming selfless, being one with Jesus, is obviously a good thing. And I think that psychedelics aren't going to force that to happen, but I think they are a tool that can be used to make you less of self. And if you have less self, you have more room for Jesus. And that is my argument for why I believe it's a good thing.
Because you become less selfish. Less selfish.
More selfless. And so that's my whole argument. I think that if I'm less selfish and more selfless, there's more room for Jesus to work in here.
And this is an overall net positive experience.
Overall net positive experience.
So, but to clarify what you're saying, you are not saying that this is the only way to be reborn again.
Oh, absolutely not. That would be, again, straight blasphemy, and I don't want to say that you must use this tool in order to be close to God. That would be ridiculous.
I mean, it's a tool to get to the same destination.
It's a tool
Maybe
to
prayer
help
could
you.
get you there.
It's a tool to help you get to the same destination.
I mean, yeah, anything could get you to this destination, right? I mean, if your whole family today, right now, died in a car wreck, there is people that have that experience happen to them, and that is the day that they become reborn again because they realize, oh my gosh,
yes,
I need to become... they literally rethink everything. And this is what psychedelics stimulates, is it makes you rethink everything.
Yes.
So maybe you could get there through prayer, reading, a life experience. It's the same destination.
I think a great way to describe it is when you have something like an event, like your family being killed in a car crash or some other horrible event or a life-shifting event, that's entropy. It's chaos. It's stirring up everything and shaking it around. And sometimes that's exactly what you need to find, to come to revelations, to realize things, to, when you have something just stuck against the wall of your brain that's just sitting there waiting to be seen, but, it's sitting there so still it never moves. It never shifts in front of your view. You never get to see it.
Yep.
It never comes to mind because it's just hidden back there sitting. So when you have something shake up the snow globe, a lot of stuff can come to mind, a lot of stuff can come to light. And I think that's a great way to describe psychedelics.
Yeah, isn't that
shaking
up the snow globe?
Shaking up the snow globe.
My friend has always told me that.
And so when you shake everything up, you're going to have to think about things. You're going to have to think about the hard things. You're going to think about the things that you didn't even know you wanted to think about. You're going to think about things on such an amazingly deep level that you will just be amazed. And obviously we can bleep his name out if he doesn't want this to be said. But Jaden, he was talking about how his dad, who had PTSD, I believe, I don't want to be wrong, I want to get the exact quote. He said that
his dad took psychedelics.
His dad took psychedelics, and I believe it was in the few hours that he was tripping, it felt like 10 years of therapy.
Wow.
And again, this isn't like me making this up. This is a legitimate quote from somebody.
Yeah,
like
someone that we know.
And
we know him, his dad.
And what's funny is all the people that are talking bad about psychedelics and hate psychedelics, I bet don't have any true knowledge of it. They haven't done any research. And what you'll notice is that the people that have done them hardly ever have bad things to say. Ever. And I get that could be the same for other things as well, but I know plenty of people that vape that say, yeah, vaping sucks for you. It's bad for you.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? They can at least be honest with themselves. I don't think anyone drinks alcohol and goes, alcohol is amazing for the human body. Yeah. Alcohol is amazing for your mental state. People that drink know, I know, it's not. It's fun.
Yeah.
However, I don't know anyone that does psychedelics and goes, I know it's bad for me. I know it's horrible, but it's fun. They go, you know what? Sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it's scary, but it is so helpful.
Yeah, which is
it's
the only
backwards.
way to grow in life is to break yourself down. And this is what this experience does.
Absolutely.
You described it as the mental gym.
A mental gym, yes.
A mental gym.
And
what do you mean by that?
So I would describe it as a mental gym, as in you're going to be working out your mind. You're working out your brain. And that's how you strengthen any muscle. If you want a muscle to get bigger, you have to work it out. You have to use it. You have to put it to the test. And you have to, put it through a bunch of different things, right? And I think another beautiful thing about that analogy is if you aren't educated on form, if you aren't helped, taught on form, okay, there's a great chance that you will injure yourself, that you will get hurt, or that you'll slip up, that you'll be out of the gym. Well, exercising. If I'm in the gym and I don't know how to do deadlift and I start going at it, there's a high chance I'm going to injure my back if I'm doing an improper amount of weight.
But if you educate yourself prior,
if I'm educated prior, exactly,
you're very likely to be fine.
There's obviously going to be the outliers. There's obviously going to be a small percent of people that don't end up fine. But that's life. And I think it's very disingenuous to just say that, oh, well, there's like 1 or 2 in 100 people that have had a negative experience, so it's obviously, horrible. It's terrible. People get hurt in the gym all the time, but I don't think anyone would argue, or at least most people would not argue, oh, the gym's horrible for you. Like, you should not work out.
Yeah.
Don't do cardio, Grayson. That's horrible for you.
Yeah.
They'd say, you know what? It's great for you. Just make sure you do it right.
But
and
so
the same way with mushrooms.
People that have had seriously bad experiences, I know it's not everyone, but there are people who have bad experiences with psychedelics. Are you claiming that that is mostly the result of them being in not the right situation or the right physical space? They might be at a party, which would be completely not recommended to be disassociating with reality while being around loud music and 30 friends, or such as that as an example. But.
Yeah. So, on that subject, why would I want to shake up my brain, experience more entropy at a place that has more like, a lot going on, like loud music, people everywhere, other substances? And by the way, please don't mix substances, period. But even with psychedelics, like, especially don't want to drink. And now I know there's some arguments for mixing certain things, but I'm not even going to say those out loud because I don't think people should experience mixing anything with psychedelics. So I'm just going to keep it on that note. And if you want to do other research and find out what you can and can't, that's on you. But I will say it's best to just not mix those substances. And so doing it at a place with other substances, not good. And like you asked, what would I say to people that have had negative experiences? I'd say, hey, it happens. But I'd also say that most of those people that have had a negative experience with psychedelics, most of the time it tends to be on either acid or some other type of psychedelic, not shrooms. And for the people where it is shrooms, it tends to be done in an environment where they weren't in a good state of mind, they weren't happy, they weren't at least, neutral. They had anxiety, they had a lot going on, they had a bad day. They did it in a place with people that aren't safe to be around. They did it in an environment that's not safe to be around, etc., etc., etc. If you do it in the comfort of your own bed with someone that's close to you, a close friend or a family member that's there to watch out for you, the chances of anything happening is so slim. As in, it is harder to have a bad trip if you're being true with your intentions and you're actually putting in the effort. It is much harder to have a bad trip than a good trip on shrooms. I stand by that statement. If you are doing it right, if you're being thoughtful, it is much harder.
You have someone there watching you, or quote unquote trip sitting you.
Like, you don't even need to have someone there, but if you feel like you do, then absolutely have someone there.
But it's definitely recommended to have somebody there, is it not?
I'd say again, it's on a person per person basis. I think the first time I would definitely have a person there.
Yeah.
I can say 8 times, I can say 50 times, whatever. It's much harder to have a bad trip than a good one if you do it right.
Okay. Recapping this past 45 minutes, however long this has been going, we believe that psychedelics could be possibly the greatest tool ever discovered. I mean, we don't even have to go as far to say that, even though I do believe that statement. But psychedelics, what we're saying is could be used as an incredible tool for introspection, for self-improvement, for growth, to grow your relationship with yourself, grow your relationship with God. You've made the claim that you think it could have the potential to help other Christians to, as you said, stimulate someone to changing their habits, shaking up the snow globe, as if the snow globe is their life, their habits, the way they view reality, and then you shake it up and it falls down in a different way, and then you're thinking, oh, maybe I don't have to raise my voice to my mother. Like, it could be something like that. Like, I don't have to allow myself to be angry at things. Like, it's up to me.
Yeah.
You realize your whole life is in your control.
Yes.
Everything is in your mind. Everything is in your head. You are the controller of your own destiny.
Exactly.
We've also made the claim that it is, in general, relatively very safe.
It's not even relatively. It's just straight up safe.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be extremely safe if you compared it to a substance that is used by millions of people daily, alcohol.
Yeah, actually.
Alcohol, legitimately, the more you consume, the closer you get to death. Death. The more alcohol is poison. The more you consume, the more you get to your body completely shutting down.
Yep.
So alcohol is worshipped in our society. Most college dorm rooms have Tito's bottles sitting against the top shelf because it's a show of we have fun in here.
Yeah.
We party.
And on that note, I have a question for you. Would you rather have for any like maybe parents listening or things like that, people like that that are concerned, I have a question for you. Would you rather, if your kid was doing a substance, just to throw this hypothetical situation out there, would you rather have your kid doing a substance where if you know what they do more and more, there's a chance like they're getting closer and closer to death, or when they do one more and more, they get closer to throwing up?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna pick the one where they're throwing
Yeah.
up anytime. Also, which one's productive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I guess the fear with parents though is that if they find out that if they came to the discovery that one of their kids was doing psychedelics, they would then assume that they are essentially doing all these other terrible substances, drugs, and would jump to conclusions. Although, as I learned in statistics class, correlation
Is not causation.
Correlation is not causation. Like, this does not mean that they're off the deep end.
Absolutely.
It could, in fact, mean the opposite. However, the problem with this and the problem that we face is that most people, for the first time that they hear someone in their life who is using a psychedelic, and from my personal experience, it was this case. The first time I ever heard, oh, I'm doing shrooms or I have shrooms, it was a person who was a druggie. So, again, correlation is not causation. The people who are doing a lot of drugs end up stumbling upon mushrooms and psychedelics.
They're just more open to it.
They're more open to substances.
Yes.
And it's just that's the battle we fight, is the realization that correlation is not causation. Just because you've heard of bad people or people who you don't respect doing these substances does not mean that these substances are not incredible tools. It's just the fact that
Absolutely.
it's so complicated, and that's what we have been trying so hard to figure out. How do we bring this forward into a 45-minute episode?
Yeah, there's just so much.
There's so much. So what would you say to someone? Because this is not anywhere near the amount of information that someone needs to feel like they understand this subject. We don't even fully understand this subject. Even professionals don't fully understand the subject.
Absolutely.
Because this is, I mean, it's not really new, but this is being studied new for the first time. Like, it's finally becoming legal in Oregon or whatever to do clinical trials and whatnot. But a personal take, I think that psychedelics have the potential to completely alter human history. And I know that sounds ridiculous. Nobody will probably give any weight to that statement if they don't know psychedelics, but there are really intelligent people who believe that psychedelics were responsible for
so many things.
Mm-hmm.
My little quick hot take to add on to that is I believe the uses of it are just so versatile. Like, for example, one thing I find that's an absolute crime in today's pharmaceutical industry is antidepressants, where even recent research has shown that, for example, I believe Zoloft was actually SSRIs in general have been proven to actually maybe not even help with depression and sometimes make it worse. And one of my hot takes is I truly believe that if I had a child who was dealing with depression, I'd be much quicker to prescribe them some sort of psychedelic therapy than SSRIs any day of the week. I honestly find it absurd that SSRIs are even prescribed to people, and I know that's a little bit off topic, but I just wanted to. Yeah, another hot take I have, just to throw it on there, is I believe that psychedelics have the potential to actually help cure sociopathy. So, just to quickly say this, psychopathy is you're born with it, sociopathy is developed.
Oh.
And so sociopathy, one of the biggest things is lack of empathy.
You're selfish.
You're very selfish. Now, what does psychedelics do?
Make you selfless.
You can remove self. And if there's no self, you have no capacity to be selfish. You have no capacity to not feel empathy.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I genuinely think that things like that, therapy over time for those with sociopathy could learn to be, once again, empathetic.
Yep.
And there's just so much potential from it. And it's just, again, we can talk about this for hours. I could make so many hot takes or so many talk about so many amazing things. We could go for hours and hours and hours. But I think, maybe someday we can do another episode if people like this one. But I think that the point of this episode here is to inform people that we've all been lied to. I know I was lied to. I'm guessing you were too. That it's some big, scary monster that's going to make you lose your mind. You're going to go crazy, that you should never touch it. Only people that do it are bad people, etc., etc., etc. And you know what? That's one of the biggest reasons why I want to tell people about this, is because one of the first thoughts I had in my mind after the first time I really did trip was, I wish someone would have told me sooner. I wish someone would have told me the truth sooner. It wasn't, man, they were right. Oh, I should never do that again. It was, what the heck, man?
Why? Why were you feeling that way?
What?
What had come of that experience?
It's just, everything was beautiful. I woke up the next day, just to clarify, there's no hangover. There was no the next day, I'm like, I have to go to work. The next day, I went outside and went for a walk down the street because I felt it was so beautiful out.
It's like a hang up.
Yeah, it was a hang up. I got off my phone that next day. I wanted to just enjoy life. I don't know anything else where you take it and the next day you're like, I want to go experience more life. You drink and you want to lay in bed all day. You smoke and you probably want to just chill and, like, you know, maybe have some like Cheetos, maybe some Taco Bell. I get that. It's fun. But psychedelics, you're not like that. It's just you want to go live.
Yeah.
Experience things. And, like, that's why I wish someone would have told me sooner.
Yep. Well, bro, I think we have attempted to squeeze as much information as we could in this short amount of time. What's our closing statement?
I think our closing statement is, obviously, we can't address every point. We can't, especially this small amount of time, because it really is small in comparative to how many hours we spent looking into this. We probably missed a lot of good talking points.
Definitely. It's inevitable.
And it's inevitable, so I highly recommend...
But we hope this serves as an introduction to an invitation for you to go learn more about this.
And, yeah.
And again, we're not telling anyone to just go make rational decisions. In no way are we responsible. For people to claim that to say that because we're saying this, we're responsible if someone makes a bad decision. No,
we're just trying to educate people.
We are literally educating on what we know, and it is up to you to decide what you want to do with your life and what you want to learn about and what you want to read about. We are not responsible for that. Mm-hmm. I don't know why we even need to say that, in my opinion, although I'm going to say it, but it's your life.
It's your life. You're in control. You're only a victim of yourself.
How many hours, I mean, I guess we don't know how many hours, but the first time I ever even thought about actually consuming magic mushrooms was after, I think, like 5 or 6 months of reading about it every single day.
Yep.
Because that's how much I had wanted to know what I was doing before you put something in your body, especially something that people say could potentially ruin you.
Yep.
Which it's not really the case, but yeah, bro.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I have else to say for my closing statement would be there's a lot of stuff we didn't hit, and that's okay. If people really like this, I'd be down to do we can do another episode where we talk about this. That'd be great. It'd be at least half a year from now, because you'll be across the world for half a year. Or keep it simple. I'm sure, Grayson, I know you'll probably be off your phone a lot in Asia, but comment down below on this video or maybe reach out in DMs. Like, you can ask questions, and I know Grayson might not be able to respond for like a good half a year, but I will be able to respond. So please ask the hard questions. If there's something in this video where I like didn't hit it and you're like, wait, I need to know more about that, I'd be happy to sit down and talk to you about it, because again, this is something I'm passionate about, and it's not something where I'm just trying to mess up people's lives. I want everyone to be informed. I want everyone to be educated. I want everyone to know about this thing. And so again, if you have any questions, you can comment below and, see if I can like respond or something, or reach out to me, because again, there's a lot we're not going to be able to hit.
Yep. James, thank you for coming on here, brother. Of course, bro.
Thank
you guys for tuning in. James is about to end this with a quote. We really appreciate your time, and we hope you enjoy the episode, and we hope you learn something new. Question everything you've ever been told. James, run it.
I believe that this is a quote from Terence McKenna. I might have just butchered that. The quote is, "Psychedelics are illegal, not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong."
Thank you.
Run it.